Imagine two strangers. They've never met, they know nothing about each other, but someone puts them in a room and asks them to do one simple thing together, just one small repeated habit. And within minutes, something extraordinary begins to happen inside their brains. Something that, according to neuroscience, creates a bond so deep that it physically rewires both of them. This isn't a metaphor. This is what the data actually shows. Today we're going inside the science of psychological bonding, and we're not going to cover the obvious stuff. Not shared values or communication. We're going somewhere stranger and far more fascinating. Because the real mechanism behind why certain people become permanently, almost cosmically bound to each other, comes down to a single word that most people have never thought about in the context of relationships. That word is synchrony. Let's start with the most disturbing finding in modern neuroscience. And I say disturbing in the best possible way. In 2010, Princeton neuroscientist Uri Hassan put two people into brain scanners simultaneously. One person told a story, the other listened. And what Hassan found changed how we think about human connection forever. The listener's brain activity began to mirror the speaker's. Not metaphorically, literally. Region by region, moment by moment, the two brains began to look identical on the scanner. And here is the part that should stop you cold. The more aligned the brains became, the stronger the connection between them. More understanding, more trust, more closeness. But then Hassan went further. He asked, what happens when the connection breaks down? What happens when the communication fails? The coupling disappeared. Completely, instantly, like a signal cut off. What this means is staggering. Every time two people engage in a shared habit, a repeated, rhythmic, mutually understood behavior, they are not just spending time together. They are performing a kind of biological handshake. Their brains are literally reaching across the space between them and synchronizing. And every single time they repeat that habit, the handshake gets stronger, faster, and harder to break. Hassan put it simply. He said, your brain as an individual is really determined by the brains you're connected to. Read that again. Your brain, the thing that makes you you, is shaped by the people you sync with. You don't just affect each other emotionally, you partially construct each other neurologically. The brain coupling Hassan documented happens not just with storytelling or conversation. It happens with any shared synchronized behavior. Walking at the same pace, breathing together, eating at the same rhythm, even the tiny unconscious habit of matching someone's posture when you sit across from them. There is a name for this unconscious behavior matching, the chameleon effect. And research has shown that when two people do this, completely without realizing it, something measurable happens. Empathy increases. Liking increases. The sense that this person is somehow on my side, somehow safe, somehow mine. That feeling rises automatically, without explanation. What's remarkable is that you don't have to know you're doing it. The bond forms below awareness. Your nervous system makes the decision before your conscious mind even notices there's a decision to make. And over years, over decades of sharing a habit with someone, long-term couples eventually develop the same mannerisms, the same gestures, sometimes the same slight expressions that flash across the face in the same situations. Years of mutual unconscious mirroring don't just bond two people, they gradually merge them. The line between where one person ends and the other begins starts to blur. Not just emotionally, but behaviorally, neurologically, physiologically. Let's talk about what's happening in the body, because this goes far deeper than the brain alone. Studies measuring romantic couples' hearts while they sleep together found something that sounds like it belongs in a poetry collection, not a scientific journal. Their sleep stages synchronize, not just their breathing. Their actual sleep architecture, the cycling through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM, begins to align. One person's brain in the depths of unconsciousness, is following the rhythm of the others. And this synchrony during sleep has been directly linked to pro-social behavior, emotional bonding, and positive affect during waking hours. What happens in your sleep, the most private, unconscious state you can be in, is being quietly coordinated by the person next to you. Now take choir singers. When they sing in unison, when their voices follow the same rhythm, their respiration synchronizes. And because breathing and heart rate are physiologically linked, their hearts begin to beat in sync too. The same pattern appears in couples who exercise together, walk together, even eat at the same pace. One study looked at romantic couples and attracted strangers on blind dates and found heart rhythm synchronization in both groups. Something about the presence of a person you're drawn to, someone whose habits you're beginning to mirror, starts pulling your cardiovascular system toward theirs. And there's one more layer here that most people don't know about. Researchers studying synchronized breathing found that when one person adjusts their breathing to match another's, it actually shifts something called cardiorespiratory coupling, the internal synchrony between your own heartbeat and your own breath. In other words, syncing with someone else slightly loosens your grip on your own independent biological rhythm. You temporarily trade a piece of your physiological self to merge with theirs. That is not a small thing. That is your body making a choice, unconsciously, automatically, to become less separate. Now I want to talk about something that, on the surface, seems trivial, but is one of the most psychologically significant habits two people can share. Something so ordinary it goes completely unnoticed. Eating together. Not a romantic dinner, not a special occasion, just consistently, regularly sharing meals. An evolutionary psychologist named Robin Dunbar ran a path analysis on the relationship between shared meals and social bonds. And the finding was decisive. The causal arrow runs from eating together to bonding, not the other way around. Most people assume we're close, so we eat together. The data says we eat together, and that's why we become close. Dunbar argues that communal eating may have evolved specifically as a bonding mechanism, one of the oldest and most reliable tools the human nervous system has for creating attachment between individuals. Here's how deep this goes. After just a single food-sharing event, one meal shared once, circulating oxytocin levels rise measurably, not just in humans, in chimpanzees and bonobos as well. The urge to bond through shared food is not cultural. It is not learned. It is written into the primate genome across millions of years. And then there's this study about firefighters. Researchers compared firefighting teams who ate together regularly versus those who didn't. The teams who shared meals didn't just bond more, they performed better in the field. Coordination improved, trust improved. The shared habit at the table translated directly into performance under pressure. Even more surprising, a controlled study on eating together via video call, just seeing another person's face on a screen while you both eat, produced measurable changes in heart rate variability and physiological synchrony compared to eating alone. The synchronizing effect of shared eating works even through a screen. Think about what that means for every meal you've ever shared with someone. Every time you ate with the same person again and again, the same family member, the same friend, the same partner, you were performing a ritual that your nervous system was quietly using to mark them as yours. But here's the question that unlocks everything. Why does any of this work? The answer lies in what researchers call temporal prediction. Your brain is, at its core, a prediction machine. It is constantly modeling the future, anticipating what comes next so it can respond faster, feel safer, use less energy. When you share a repeated habit with someone, you're giving your brain a gift, predictability. The pattern of another person's behavior starts to map onto your neural architecture. Their rhythm becomes an expected rhythm. And when something is expected, when the brain can predict it, the response to it shifts from alert to safe, from stranger to familiar, from neutral to cherished. And here is the neuroscience detail that will change how you see every shared ritual you have. Engaging in rhythmic activities together, walking, breathing, eating, even having synchronized conversations, activates the brain's temporal prediction circuits and triggers oxytocin release. It's automatic, it's biological, and it builds every single time the habit is repeated. Your brain is not just tracking the habit. It's building a model of the other person inside itself. And once that model is fully constructed, the feeling that follows is not just affection or comfort. It's something closer to necessity. Like removing them would require removing a part of your own cognition. Now, let's go to one of the strangest and most underreported findings in relationship psychology. When two people bond deeply, they develop a private language. Not metaphorically, literally. They develop words that exist only between them, sounds that have meanings only they share, phrases that compress entire emotional worlds into 2 syllables. Researchers Carol Brewis and Judy Pearson studied this phenomenon in couples and found a significant statistical correlation between the use of couple-specific idioms and relationship satisfaction. The more of these private words a couple had, and the more they used them, the more satisfied they reported being in the relationship. But here's the finding almost nobody talks about. These private words form in the earliest stages of the relationship. They emerge when the bond is still being built, before it's secure, before it's proven. And they're used most intensively during that formation period. Which means the private language isn't just a symptom of closeness, it's a tool for creating it. The brain, sensing the early vulnerability of a new bond, instinctively begins building an exclusive shared code, a linguistic structure that belongs to no one else, that signals, we have a world others can't enter. There's a deeper psychological mechanism here. A private word or phrase carries with it the entire memory of how it was born. Every time it's used, it doesn't just communicate a meaning, it recalls a shared experience. It reinstates a moment. It proves in real time that a history exists between these two people that cannot be replicated with anyone else. And when a couple uses one of these private phrases during a conflict, during a moment of tension or disconnection, something remarkable happens. The shared code acts like a circuit breaker. It interrupts the threat response. It reminds both nervous systems, we are still us. Research on humor in couples confirms this. When goofing around and shared private language is used during disputes, it actually strengthens the relationship rather than trivializing the conflict. Here's where this gets philosophically strange, and I want you to sit with this for a moment. Research on interpersonal rhythmic synchrony found that sharing rhythmic timing with another person produces a measurable increase in what scientists call self-other merging. That's the technical term for the psychological dissolving of the boundary between yourself and another person. Your sense of I is not as fixed as you think. It expands and contracts based on who you're syncing with. Two people who share a deep, repeated habit are regularly experiencing, even if they never consciously recognize it, a partial dissolution of self, a blurring of where one person ends and another begins. This is not spiritual language. This is what shows up in experiments measuring perspective taking, identity attribution, and social cognition. The self, it turns out, is porous, and shared habits are one of the mechanisms through which two separate selves quietly begin to overlap. Now let's go even bigger, because this bonding mechanism isn't just about two people. It scales up. Evidence suggests that the human propensity for synchrony may have been selected during evolution precisely because it allowed our ancestors to bond with large groups of strangers, not just intimate partners. A tribe that could synchronize its behavior, could coordinate its actions, defend itself, feed itself, survive in ways that isolated individuals could not. The bonding ritual of shared habits, the shared meal, the shared rhythm, the shared private gesture, is not a quirk of modern psychology. It is one of the oldest survival tools in the human repertoire. In one Oxford experiment, children split into opposing groups literally given different colored uniforms to encourage rivalry, were asked to dance together synchronously. Just dance. Same rhythm, same movement. Afterward, former rivals bonded more strongly and physically moved closer to each other than children who danced without synchrony. One shared rhythmic habit dissolved what had been constructed as tribal division. And there's a finding about what shared synchrony does to how we treat strangers, not just the person we're bonding with. When two people develop deep brain-to-brain synchrony, their pro-social behavior toward outside people also increases. The bond between them makes them collectively more generous, more cooperative, more willing to help someone they don't even know. In other words, two people bound by a shared habit don't just become closer to each other, they become better toward the world. Let me bring this all together now, because I think the most important thing this research reveals is something most people spend their whole lives missing. We tend to think that deep bonds are built through events, through grand gestures, dramatic moments, pivotal conversations. And yes, those things matter, but they're not the actual mechanism. The actual mechanism is small, repeated, rhythmic, shared behavior. It's the same walk taken together every morning, the same way two people make coffee in the same kitchen at the same time, the inside word that only two people in the world understand, the rhythm of a shared meal, the cadence of a regular phone call, the synchronized breathing of two people who have fallen asleep next to each other enough times that their unconscious nervous systems have started to coordinate. None of these things feel significant when they're happening. That's precisely why they work, because the bonding process doesn't require attention to function. It operates below awareness, below intention, below effort. Your brain is doing it automatically, every single time. Neuroscience researcher Ilanit Gordon described synchrony as social glue and traced it back to the very first bond any of us ever form, the synchrony between an infant and its caregiver. That original attunement, the matching of rhythm, gaze, breath, and timing between a baby and the person keeping it alive, is the evolutionary prototype for every deep human bond that follows. We never stop needing it. We never stop being wired for it. The same mechanism that bound you to the first person who kept you alive is the mechanism that binds you to every person who matters to you now. So what is the one strange habit? What is the thing that if two people share it, makes them psychologically bound forever? The honest answer, the one the research actually supports, is that it's not the specific habit that matters. It's the structure of it. It has to be shared, not parallel, not adjacent, truly mutual, something both people participate in, oriented toward each other. It has to be repeated, not once, not occasionally, again and again, until the brain builds a full predictive model of the other person around it. And it has to carry rhythm, a timing that the nervous system can synchronize to. Because synchrony is the mechanism. The habit is just the delivery system. The walk you take with someone every evening. The meal you never eat alone anymore because it stopped being your meal and became ours. The nonsense word only two people in the world use for a thing that doesn't even need a word, except that naming it together made it real. These are not small things. They are, according to neuroscience, the literal architecture of human attachment. They are the physical process through which two separate brains, two separate bodies, two separate selves, slowly, invisibly, irreversibly, become something that neither one can fully be without the other. And the reason it feels like forever is because, in neurological terms, it actually is. Once the brain has built a complete model of another person inside itself, once the rhythms have aligned, the language has been created, the synchrony has been established, dismantling that bond doesn't just cause emotional pain. It requires the brain to dismantle part of its own structure, to remove a pattern that has become load-bearing. That's why losing someone you were deeply bonded to doesn't just feel like loss. It feels like a part of your own mind went missing. Because in a very real sense, it did.